I'm here today to conduct an interview of Darla Luebbe. It is July 25th, 2006, shortly after 6 p.m., and this interview is being held at her office on Wilson Bridge Road. If you could just state your name, please.
Darla Luebbe.
And what is your ethnic or racial background?
I'm adopted. I think that I would be white, but who knows?
All right, and where did you grow up?
Here, Columbus, Ohio.
And what is your earliest memory?
My very first memory is watching JFK's funeral with the horse that the boots were on backwards. And I remember that explicitly because it scared me. I didn't understand.
And did you attend elementary and high school here in Columbus?
I did.
And what schools did you attend?
Valley Forge Elementary, Woodward Park Middle School, and Northland High School.
All right. And did you graduate from Northland High School? Mm-hmm. And when did you graduate?
1978.
All right. Well, let me back up. When you were growing up, who were your heroes, if you had any?
I would say my heroes were usually musical heroes, such as Barbra Streisand, and of course your parents, my grandmother, were people that I looked up to, and my first grade teacher.
All right. And how old were you when you realized that you may be different than the other kids?
When I was 12.
Okay, and can you tell me about that?
Yeah, there was a girl in our class, maybe I should say first grade, because Miss White, my first grade teacher, I was in love with her. I named my dog after her cat. Her cat's name was Tiki, so I named my dog Tiki. And I just loved her. I thought she was wonderful. And I remember when she announced to us at the end of the year, first grade, that she was engaged and going to get married. And I was crushed. But of course I never thought I was gay then. I didn't even know what that meant, really. So I would say probably when I was 12 or 13, there were a couple of girls who were kind of racy, I guess you would call, because I would not have considered myself racy, who you would have a slumber party or you'd have a sleepover. And things would happen, like you would kiss each other, or you would play the game of, I'm going to put my finger on a part of my body and you tell me if you can guess what it is. And I'm sure they would be shocked if I said their names, because I know both of them are married to men. In fact, one of them got pregnant and had to leave junior high school when we were in 8th grade, because back then, if you were pregnant, you weren't allowed to go to school. So I would say that's when I knew it. Did I ever accept that? No, not until I was 31.
When you first realized you may have had these feelings when you were 12 or 13, did you tell anyone?
No. In fact, I felt that something was wrong with me, that it was dirty. I kind of felt bad the next day after the sleepover, and thought, what's wrong with me? Why did I do such a thing? I'm never doing that again. And, it would happen probably 6 weeks later, but, you never talked about it. In fact, you didn't even talk about it with that person, and you didn't ever do anything like that during the daytime. This only happened at night when you were in the bed before you went to sleep in your PJs.
When you were growing up, do you ever remember hearing any of the adults or the other kids talk about people that either were gay or that they thought were gay?
The only thing I ever remember, my dad was definitely Archie Bunker. That, if you think of Archie Bunker, that would be my father. He was racist. He was an alcoholic. He was every ism that you could typically be in the 60s and 70s. And the only thing I ever heard him say, the only reference I ever remember them saying, until I was much older, when I was young, they'd say, oh, he's swishy, swishy. And so swishy, swishy meant that someone, and they'd do the limp-handed thing, like Liberace. My Aunt Norma loved Liberace, and my mom and dad would make fun of her so much. Oh, she's in love with a swishy, swishy. And of course, I didn't know what that meant. I just thought it meant that he had nice clothes, because I just remember him being sparkly, and he always was very, just out there and very dramatic, and I thought that was fabulous. So I thought Swishy Swishy was a good thing. I didn't know they were making fun of him.
When you were growing up, did you know anyone else that was gay or that identified themselves as gay?
You know, I didn't know then. I know now that in my entire life, I have surrounded myself with gay men and lesbians.
Isn't it fascinating how that happens?
Yes, absolutely unknowing. I don't know when you want to jump to, like when I'm 31, but on September 26, 1991, my two best friends, who are both women, pulled me aside. We were at a meeting together, and pulled me aside and said, "We need to talk to you. We are lesbians, we're in love, we're leaving our husbands." And I said, "You can't be lesbians, you have kids." And I mean, I remember that coming out of my mouth. "You're married, you can't be lesbians." And then that whole week we called it Coming Out to Darla Week, because 11 of my closest friends who had all talked, and they were just so upset with my two friends, Kim and Kathy, who were going to tell me about their personal lives and their story, because they knew once Kim and Kathy told me, then they felt they would have to tell me, or I would start to figure it out. And I'm good at taking friends from different backgrounds. I had a group of singing friends. I had a group of work real estate friends. I had another group of friends, and I had brought them all together so we would socialize together, and they all knew each other. And so, you know, all the lesbians who were behind the scenes that I had no idea were lesbians, now two of them were coming out to me, so it was going to rock the boat of the whole group. And some of them were totally thought that was a great idea. Most of them were like, "Oh my gosh, no, you can't tell her." So we called it Coming Out to Darla Week, and everyone would call me, "Hey, can we go out to lunch? Hey, can we go out to dinner?" By Thursday or Friday of that week, I'm like, "So you're lesbian? So you're gay too?" I mean, the whole week, 11 people who I'm close to and still close to this day. So yes, I had totally surrounded myself with lesbians and gay men. My high school sweetheart, who I dated 3 years, who we tried to have sex and we couldn't because we laughed, and went to the prom together. He is a gay man in New York. He's an architect. He owns his own company. He did the Barcelona, Spain Olympics, the architecture for that building. He did the architecture for the MTV building in New York. You know, he's a gay man. That was my boyfriend in high school. We were in drama club together. So I have totally surrounded myself with gays and lesbians unknowingly, but that's what I felt comfortable with. The little boy who I have known since we were 5 years old, his name is Jimmy, and he lived across the street from me. We had a band. He played the guitar. I played, which was a yardstick, and I played the drums, which was the Charlie Chips potato chip metal bin. And there was a band of 4 of us, his other 2 brothers and sisters, and he and I always played together. And you know, my surprise 10 years ago, I'm at a function and I see him there. And we had been good friends since I was 5 years old. So there has been a gay lesbian theme in my life my entire life, unknowingly to me.
So what happened after you graduated from high school? What did you do next?
I went to college.
Where did you go?
Wright State
All
in
right.
Dayton, Ohio. I thought I wanted to be a nurse, and I did it, and I hated it. I didn't like it at all. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I went to college for 2 years and thought, I can't do this anymore. So, and in college, it was a big joke of how many guys I dated. For whatever reason, and I'm sure some therapist out there could figure it out in 5 seconds, but I would use sex with men as a way to get whatever I wanted, be it free drinks, or be it a night on the town, or be it gifts, or whatever. And my whole self-esteem was built on walking in a bar, figuring out which man I was going to get to want me. And then once they wanted me, I was done. But I would sometimes, or sometimes not, depending on my mood, fulfill the rest of the evening with having sex with them. So in college, it was pretty well known in my sorority that, I mean, it was a big joke, like on, I can't, that Hell Week, and then they have Hell Night when you're, you know, that first year plebe or whatever they call it, and then you become a part of the sorority. I had to make a mobile of all the guys I had dated the first 4 months that I had been there at college, and there were 11 guys hanging on this mobile. And it was never that I ever really cared about them. It was more of just, that's the only way I guess I could relate to men, is by looking at them as what could I get out of them, unfortunately.
Were you having experiences with women during the same time?
No, not at all. None whatsoever. Didn't even think of it as an option. Because really in high school, people would say, oh, that Richie, he's a faggot. And I would say, no, he's not. And I would stand up and I can remember screaming at people saying, how dare you say such a horrible thing? Stop talking about my friend like that. And fighting tooth and nail for people, for them, number one, not to be called names like that. And then number two, I was just clueless. My friend David and my friend Richie, who I swore weren't fags, were having sex together, and I didn't even know it. So until, many years later. So no, I didn't, and I didn't especially know any lesbians. None. Mm-mm.
So after you figured out nursing wasn't for you, what happened next?
I decided to become a hairdresser because that seemed exciting and something that would be fun. And so I did that for 3 years. And
where were you living when you did that?
Here, in Columbus. Yep. And I worked at a salon in downtown called the Glenby's, and it was in the Hallies downtown. That was the first time I'd ever been on a bus going downtown because I was from the suburbs. I grew up at the Carl and Morris Road area. There was a place called the Patio, and we lived behind that area there most of my life. So I'd never been really downtown very much. My mother was afraid of downtown, so I got on the bus and I worked downtown for a few months, and then my salon was in Kingsdale. And I will never forget, this is my funniest story as a hairdresser. This woman walked in from the Hallies in Arlington, and she threw her purse in the chair and said, "I can't believe it." And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "They have Gucci bags out there for sale. Now just anybody can buy a Gucci bag." And I said, "Angie, if it makes you feel any better, I could not afford the Gucci bag." So I'll never forget that as long as I live. She was appalled that Gucci was on sale. I didn't really know what a Gucci was either at the time, but it was pretty funny.
Now, at the time that you were working in the salons,
yes,
did you meet gay men then?
I really didn't. Where I met gay men is because when I first started being a hairdresser, they don't tell you that you're working straight commission, which is what I've done all my life. And so you have to build a clientele. So what I did is I bartended. Until I was 20, I worked at Friendly's and served ice cream. Then, as soon as I was 21 and could bartend, I went across the street to the Chi-Chi's because by then I had moved to a salon called The Hair Affair on 161 behind the Dunkin' Donuts. And so I would work there during the day, and then at night go to the Chi-Chi's across the street and be a bartender. So at night, at first I started off as a cocktail waitress and then a bartender. So at night when we would close up the bar, there'd be 6 or 7 of us. I would be the only straight one there. Unknowingly, everyone, again, they were all gay. Beautiful gay men. I mean, their hair was coiffed perfectly. Their skin was absolutely flawless. They had a perfect tan, because that was before bronzers. And they were absolutely fabulous looking. And I'm like, what do you mean? You're gay? And they're like, yes, we're gay. And I'd go to gay parties and had no idea. So I think I was a fag hag for a while. I guess I didn't even think of that. So yeah, I had met some gay men there. But again, never any lesbians that I remember. Yeah, no lesbians.
All right, so what is the time period, years-wise, that you were doing the hair?
That would be from from 1980 to 1984. And then I became a platform artist for Clairol. And I was on stage and I would teach other hairdressers how to do hair color. And I was real wild. I had a streak in my hair, a purple streak, and, just thought I was all that, and would travel a lot. And that's when I started to see more gay and lesbian people. Because in Columbus, Ohio, they really weren't a whole lot. Or at least it wasn't flaunted. Or where I went, that's not where anyone was. But when I went to Chicago and New York for the hair shows, then I would definitely see gay and lesbians then. And I wouldn't see the lesbians at the show. I would see the gay men at the shows when I was doing the shows, but then I'd see the lesbians afterwards out on the town when we were out, in New York and in Chicago.
When was the first time that you went to a gay bar here in Columbus?
I went and saw Jimmy James sing at I think it was Wall Street, in December 5th of 1991. That was the very first gay bar. No, wait, you know what? I just remembered something. My girlfriend, when I turned 21, my girlfriend took me to the garage. There was a group of us, and this one gal was like, we got to go to this bar. It's a great dance bar. And we walk in, and I'm like, wait a minute. These are all guys. It took me probably 10 minutes to even notice, because we're all just, hooting and hollering and having a good old time and dancing. And then I'm looking around going, all these guys are dancing together. And I turned to my friend and I go, you brought me to a gay bar on my 21st birthday? So that was the first time I was ever in a gay bar. So then,
and what year would have that been?
That was in 81. Okay. So 10 years later, in 91, I went to Wall Street and saw Jimmy James sing. And that was when I was starting to figure out that I was a lesbian.
All right, well, let's talk about that. Tell me about your coming out process.
It was very quick. The coming out to Darla week started making me question who I was as a person. I never enjoyed sex with men. The last time that my husband and I had sex, I was married at the time, too. I was married 7 years. And I thought that everyone was just unhappily married. That's all I ever saw from my parents. So that's, pretty much what I thought marriage was. And here we are on a cruise. I had won this cruise through my work. And also I worked for my father-in-law's real estate company. So I'm on this cruise. My husband is banging away. I'm, this fabulous paradise cruise. We're in a fabulous suite, and we're having sex, and I'm thinking, oh my God, will he ever be done? And I thought to myself, Darla, there's something wrong here, because if you can't enjoy sex in this most romantic setting possible, something's wrong. Either something's wrong with you or something's wrong with the sex. So I have to figure it out. And that was probably in May or June of 91. 91 was a pinnacle year in my life. So then we had Kim and Kathy telling me about their relationship in September of 91. And that was, then we had the coming out to Darla week, and that was where I started to question myself. Darla, if this is who you unknowingly feel comfortable with and surround yourself with, maybe that's what is going on with you. Maybe that's why you're not emotionally involved in this marriage. You're not sexually involved in this marriage. It's like you show up, but your heart's not in it. And so then on November 1st of 91 is when I told my husband. I did not tell him I was a lesbian. I told him that we needed to get divorced, because he and I both knew that we weren't in love, and we were just going through the motions, and I didn't want a life like that. And he deserved to have someone who loved him, and I wasn't in love with him. And I knew that I needed to change my life. Wasn't sure how yet, but I knew that I was living a lie, and I wanted to change it immediately. So I did.
So who was the first person that you told that you were gay?
Well, there's a good question. When did I become gay? Was it the moment that I thought I might be gay? Was it the moment I read the first lesbian book? Was it the first time that I masturbated and had an orgasm? Was it the first time I had sex with a woman? I don't know exactly the exact moment I became gay or a lesbian. I don't know when that moment was. And I don't know what the experts say. So that's a good question. I'm not sure, because those are all different time periods, and probably a whole 3-month process for all of those things to happen, because the first time I had sex with a woman was on December 12th of 1991. And I started questioning my life September 26th. So September, October, November, December, that's only a 3-month period that my life changed. So I don't know how to answer that.
After your friends started confiding in you and telling you what their story was, did you look back on it and say to yourself, I should have realized or known what was going on with these different people?
It's like, I don't know if you ever listened to Wayne Dyer, he's a motivational speaker. I believe he's a preacher, but he's also a motivational speaker. And he has a CD called Your Sacred Self. And he talks about a knowing. For instance, we know that the sky is blue. Sometimes we might think it's going to rain, or we think it's going to be sunny, but we always know that if it's sunny, the sky is blue. It's a knowing. Just like I know I have black hair. That is a knowing. Once this door opened up in front of me, that you didn't have to just be a married woman with a man. There were other sexual opportunities. And not only do I mean sexual, but emotional connection. Because it was all part of it. It was like I had this knowing. As soon as that happened, within days, I had this knowing that I'm one of them too. I'm a lesbian. That's why all these people I've surrounded myself with, this is who I feel comfortable with. These are my people. And I had a knowing. And I knew that I was one of them too. So that's when I first started to figure it out.
Let's go back on the career track. You were you said for 4 years.
I was a hairdresser.
Right, and then what happened next?
Well, I decided I didn't want to be a hairdresser anymore because I was very bored. It was nice working with people, but just sitting talking about hair and clothes and makeup and husbands and that kind of thing got very boring. So I wanted to do something. I thought maybe I need some office skills. So my parents were very blue collar. My mom was a restaurant worker. My father was an electrician, and so I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I'm the first person in my family to have a passport and go abroad. So I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do with my life? And I went to an office for a steel broker, and I worked for him for 3 months until he had to lay me off because he couldn't keep me. And I just answered telephones. And then the next office gig I did was for Goodale's transmission company, and I worked in the office, and I learned about payables and receivables. That's the first time I was ever on a computer. And this was like in 83, 84. And then in 85, I answered an ad in the paper, and it was for office manager. And I talked to this woman on the phone for an hour, and it was for a company called Remax One, and it was a real estate company. And keep in mind, my father-in-law owned a real estate company called Metro 2 Realty. I was potentially going to be working at Remax One. And so I thought, I need to talk to him. Now, I wasn't going to be an agent, but it was still his competition. So I asked him if it was a problem. He said, no, not at all. It's okay. So I went and worked there because I got married in 85 to my husband. And then right after we got married, I started working at Remax One, and I worked there for 3 years until 1988. And that's when I told myself, I can do this job, being a realtor, better than any of these people here. And so that's when I got my real estate license. And then, of course, when I got my license, I left Remax One and went to my father-in-law's company, Metro 2 Realty, and worked there until January 15th of 1992, when I had to tell him that, my son and he were getting divorced, and it would be better if I left, and he was in agreement with me. So I had sat in October of 91, I had sat next to Pat Grable, who was the owner of King Thompson at the time. He was also the president of the Columbus Board of Realtors, but I didn't know who he was. And he was real nice. We were getting a designation called GRI. And he was real nice, and he said as a joke, hey, if you ever get divorced, I want you to come work for me. This was in October of 91. He didn't know what was going on in my personal life. So when I realized in November that I was going to be getting a divorce, I called Pat and said, remember when you said that? And he's like, well, sure. I said, I'm getting divorced. And he was appalled. Oh, my God, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Can I take you out to dinner? And then I knew that that's where I was going to go. And so then told my ex-father-in-law that I was going to be changing companies, which he understood. This gentleman was like a father figure to me. It was horrible. I didn't want to go, but I knew I had to. He was all cool with it. He said, finish out your files. I probably had, 8 or 9 in contract that I had to finish through. Then, unbeknownst to me, my ex-husband-to-be, because we were still legally married, we didn't get officially divorced until April of 92. My ex-husband had taken, because I had moved into another bedroom, but we were still sharing our house, and I didn't lock the door. I didn't, and I had been going to a therapist, which, who told me to write things down. And he took my journal, which I'd never journaled before or anything. He took my journal and copied it. And it had all of my secret thoughts, secret feelings, love poems, just all kinds of things, questions about myself. And he copied it. It was like 30-some pages. He made copies and gave it to my father. That Friday night, after I gave my notice to my father-in-law, he gave copies to my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, 2 sisters-in-laws that I worked with, and a brother-in-law who I worked with. And so they all sat there and read my private, innermost feelings and thoughts. Well, of course, it talked about my sexuality and being a lesbian. The next morning, my father-in-law called me at 9 o'clock in the morning, said, you have exactly 12 hours to get your shit out of my office. Otherwise, you'll find it on the curb at Cleveland Avenue. So
wow.
I had to go into my office, open my drawer. My files were gone. He had taken them. He was going to finish it out. So that night, I had to start calling, looking up my own clients in the phone book, because we didn't have computers for clients then, really. I had a little box, and luckily I had taken it with me. Something just told me to do it. And I had to call them all and say, I'm embarrassed to tell you this, but there's a little private, personal issue. I'm leaving my company. My father-in-law's really upset, and so I need you to call him and tell him that you hired me, and you want me to finish the file, which they all did. So on Monday morning, he called me and said, come get your files back. But every time I had a closing, I had to go take the file back to his office, get the check, because a check's made out to the real estate broker. And then the broker has to make the check out to the realtor. So then one of those times he said, so are you going to keep your name, or are you going to change it? Because Luebbe was his last name. And I said, in my mind, the whole time I was there, I'm scared, I'm petrified, but I'm thinking, okay, just like a dog, don't let them see that you're afraid. And, be a pit bull myself. And I'm like, why does it bother you? With this real cavalier attitude. And he's like, yeah, as a matter of fact, it does. And I said, well, then I think I'll fucking keep it. And so that's why my name's Darla Luebbe. I kept it because I'd already been a realtor for about 4 years, and then I had already gotten to know a lot of other realtors when I worked at the other real estate company for 3 years. So that was 7 years of name recognition that I wasn't willing to lose. And honestly, I might have thought about changing it, but he pissed me off, and I was like, I'm not going to let you bully me. So I kept it. So that's why my name's Darla Luebbe, the lesbian.
Well, why don't we talk about that since you brought it up?
Uh-huh.
Tell me about how you came to the point of your unique advertising strategy.
Call the Lesbian was due to my father-in-law. he, near the end, like probably in March of 92 or April, right around the time where I was getting divorced from my husband, one of the last checks that I had to bring into the office, my father-in-law was saying, I'm going to ruin you. And I said, really? How's that? And he said, because I'm going to tell everyone in the real estate community that you're a lesbian, and I'm going to ruin your business. And I said, Jim, you're going to die trying. So I thought to myself, when I go out to my car and almost pissed my pants, what am I going to do? Oh my God, people know I'm never going to sell the house again. And so after I calmed down and took an extra Xanax and maybe had a cocktail, I don't know, and tried to calm down, I realized the reason why my being a lesbian and him telling the secret had power was because it was a secret. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell everybody before he does. So I called the King Thompson advertising department. And there was a gal there by the name of Mary Beth. And I said, Mary Beth, I need to put an ad in the Stonewall Union Journal. Have you ever heard of it? And she goes, no, I haven't. And I said, well, that and along with the Gay People's Chronicle, they're gay publications, and I want to run an ad in both of those. And she goes, okay, well, I'll get the information. And I hung up the phone, and I almost puked because it was so scary, because it's like, okay, here we go, ride the ride. Here's, you're making choices. And so, honestly, my father-in-law, to take his power away from me, I outed myself before he outed me. I wanted to take the control back. So that's why the Call the Lesbian started. Because if I told everyone I was a lesbian first, he couldn't hurt me.
Now, in your first advertising that you did in the gay media, did you use that phrase?
Yeah, Call the Lesbian.
How was it that you came up with that?
I have a client by the name of Garbo Seltzer, and she's a writer, and she had written an article for the Chicago Tribune that was about her buying experience of a home, and I had worked with her. And she had worked with several realtors, and during that time, in this article, she's talking about how then she decided, she kept having bad luck, never getting a house. And then she worked with me, and then in this article, she's like, here's who I need to call. I need to call the lesbian. And that's where this whole thing came from. So I asked her, Garbo, can I use that in my advertising? And she said yes. And so that's where it came from Garbo. So.
And what sort of response did you get to that advertising strategy?
Well, several different responses. Some of the gay and lesbian realtors called me and said, oh, you can't do that. And I said, yes, I can. And they said, oh, no, you can't be that in your face. You're going to be attacked. And I said, well, then I'll be attacked. But that's what I'm going to do. Because that's also another first. I was the first gay or lesbian to put my face in an ad along with the Call the Lesbian. Because most of the gay and lesbians just used their company names and didn't show their picture. Some of them told me it was because they were so good looking that the public would call them and pretend they were buying houses, but really they just wanted to be with that person because they were so good looking. I'm not going to say his name. But you know who you are. So that's why I thought, I'm just going to be out there, and if it hurts me, it hurts me. But the good thing is, the clients who decide to work with me, we're going to have a good time. They're going to know about me. They're going to know about my real life. I don't have to pretend, because I am not a pretender. I am not a good pretender. Clients that I've had to work with who can't live in their school district, who are teachers, whose jobs are not protected, I could not live their life. They keep everything silent. They keep on to their personal life. It's very sacred. They don't talk about it. They're careful about what rings they wear on which hands. They have to scrutinize every single thing they say and do. I am not good at that. When you meet me, I am who I am. I say whatever I feel. I try it as my girlfriend, or I should say my wife now, as my wife tells me, I do not have a very good governor on my mouth, which can get me into trouble but also endears me to others. So I'm not good at that, and luckily I don't have to be. I can be who I am, and it hasn't affected, to the best of my knowledge, it has not affected my business. Have I lost clients because of it? I'm sure of it, but then I'm sure I've also gained it. I've had some people, I had a professor from the University of Toledo call me. She had been in town. She saw my ad in the lavender listings. She was appalled. She just wanted to call me and tell me she was appalled. She thought it was horrible that I would use my sexuality as a way to get business. And I said, I appreciate your opinion. I'm glad you don't live in Columbus. And thanks for calling. I mean, what can I say? She's entitled to her opinion, but I didn't really care about her opinion. I know that I don't use it to use against people. I use it as a plus, because I'll never forget this. And I saw this guy at Pride this year. This was the first year I was ever in the Pride Parade. I've always walked the parade route, but I've never been on a float. And so I had a float this year, and I got to see I've sold over 1,000 houses, so I got to see lots and lots of past clients and a lot of potential new business too. But this gal came up to me and she said, do you remember me? And I said, of course I do. You're Marisa Kenny. She was the first lesbian I ever worked with. Keep in mind, I was married and I was straight at the time. She and her girlfriend were buying a house, and I remembered they were looking at the master bedroom. And Marisa said, this should be big enough for both of us. And then took in her breath like, oh my God, what did I just say? Because here she was talking about the two of them sleeping together, because they had this whole facade. You know, they were going to be roommates in 2 bedrooms. And she looked at me, and I said, Marisa, is your money green? And she said, yes. And I said, good, because that's all I care about. And I turned around and walked away so they could have a moment to calm down and relax. And that was the first gay client that I worked with. And I didn't care. It didn't matter to me. And she reminded me of that moment. And then there we are together, 2 lesbians talking, and it was just really cool. It was a really cool moment.
Did you ever have any problems? I mean, you mentioned the woman who called you from Toledo. And did you ever have any problems associated with the advertising?
No, I did something a little risky not too long ago. During Pride weekend in the other paper, I ran what would normally be a gay ad, because I'm very careful. Usually I would run my gay ads in Outlook, not in the other paper. But the other paper's starting to get pretty alternative. And Columbus, at least in my world, seems to be pretty accepting. So I ran a 1/4-page ad that says, remember the #1 rule in real estate, call the lesbian. And then on the side it says, Darla doesn't discriminate. She works with straights too. And that was the first time I'd ever had that running in a straight publication. And I had probably that week 4 negative phone calls. They were all men. They were all probably between the ages of 17 to 25. They were calling for Darla Luebbe the lesbian, and they wanted to know if I could help them buy a house, and they really wanted to meet the lesbian. And it was like crank calls. 10 at night, 1 in the morning, that kind of thing. They'd leave a message on my voicemail here at the office, because that's the number that was in the ad. Well, they don't know that I have call capturing, so I could get their phone numbers, even if it was a private caller. And I called every one of them, and I said, now, were you calling because you need to buy a home, or are you harassing me? Because if you're harassing me, I want you to know I have the latest technology, and I will take you to court and threaten you at the highest extent of the law possible if you're harassing me. But I'm sure you're not calling to harass me. Am I correct? And they left me alone. They never called back. So that's the only negative thing. One time, Reverend Fred Phelps was in town, and I would say this was probably 8 or 9 years ago, and he must have just gone through the lavender listings, and he called my voicemail and talked and talked and talked. I think maybe he was trying to fill it up so that other people couldn't leave messages, but he just talked about, what a horrible kind of person that I was. I needed to change my ways, and I was going to go to hell. And I only listened to probably the first 3 or 4 minutes and then deleted it. But it went on for 29 minutes. And that's really the only negative stuff, to the best of my knowledge.
What sorts of positive reactions have you gotten?
It's really amazing. When I go to something like Pride or the HRC dinner, everyone says to me, "Oh my God, there's a lesbian. Hey, you're Darla Luebbe, the lesbian." And in my mind, when I see a person, if I've sold them a home, how I know them is first their street address comes up in my head, my Rolodex head. First the street comes up, then the inside of their home comes up, then their name. That's how I remember people. So it's a little tiring when I'm in an HRC or some large event, because I'm like, oh my God, did I sell them a home? How do they know my name? And then I realize I don't know them. They know me because of all the advertising, because my picture's in it. And so that's really fun. I mean, I felt like a rock star at the Pride March this year. I was on top of a Hummer and, going down the streets, and everyone was screaming, "Call the lesbian, call the lesbian. Oh my God, it's called Darla Luebbe, the lesbian." And there's lots of lesbians in this town, but I'm the lesbian. And so I think that's a wonderful thing. The second thing is, I think that, this was a cool thing. My ad, I know that someone sent it in trying to get me in trouble or to cause me harm. They sent my ad to the Jay Leno show. And then Jay had it on his Monday night headliners and legends or something, where he held up my ad, and he looked at the ad, he said, "This is one of my favorites." He turns it around, and it says, "Remember the #1 rule in real estate, call the lesbian." And so everyone starts laughing, call the lesbian. So then everyone saw that, and so then I used it in some ads. So it's like, I really believe I'm protected, that I have angels who protect me, and so anything that someone's trying to do in a negative light, it always gets turned around and becomes a positive for me. So I'm just blessed. I have a wonderful life. I really, really do. So I really haven't had many negative experiences. Everything has been positive. I'm very lucky, considering I know lots of women and men who've been gay and lesbian much longer than I have, and they've had horrible experiences where they lost family members, where they lost children, where they lost their jobs. I can honestly say I have lost 2 friends because of this, being a lesbian, and that's all. 2 friends, and they obviously weren't friends, or if they were friends, they were more closed-minded than I thought they would be. And it's their loss. I feel sorry for them. It is their loss. Becky Hutton Crane, who I call her once a year, and I always say, "Becky, it's Darla from high school, Darla, who supported you in marrying your black husband. So now, just wondering if you still can't talk to the lesbian, would love to hear from you." Click, and then I never hear from her. So there's only 2 people I've ever lost like that, but no close family members. So I feel very, very fortunate and very lucky.
You currently work for Keller Williams.
Mm-hmm. When you're a realtor, you're self-employed. Okay. So I use the umbrella of Keller Williams Capital Partners.
All right. And how long have you been here?
I have been here. It'll be 3 years in November. I've been a realtor almost 20 years.
Okay. I want to ask you about anything that you may be aware of on a couple of other topics.
Absolutely.
Other than your time in Dayton, have you lived in Columbus all your life?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Can you believe it?
Sure. I just want to...
My mother always lived here, and my father passed away when I was 25 in 85. And my mother was the exact opposite of me. Very frail, very quiet, very unassuming, low expectations. It's hard to believe that I was her daughter. And so she lived until 2000, and I would never have left Columbus without being here and taking care of her. So that's really why I stayed. And now I stay because my wife has two grandchildren, and she would never leave them. So we're probably here for the rest of our lives.
Sure. Well, Columbus is a great place.
I think so too.
Do you have any siblings? I don't think I asked you that. Okay.
I am adopted. My mother was a waitress at the Howdy House on Hudson when she was here in Columbus, and her friend that she worked with, who was another waitress, her sister was pregnant with me. So John Hill, who was a judge he was a lawyer at the time, and then became a judge in the children's court. She said, if I want to adopt that woman's baby, but I don't want her to know it's me, can you do that? And he said, sure. And they called it the gray market back then. That was in 1960. And so he talked to my mother, or my birth mother, whatever you want to call it, and they paid medical expenses and all those kinds of things. And then they went to the hospital, White Cross, that was here, and 3 days after I was born, they didn't know if I was going to be a boy or girl. They paid her expenses and that kind of thing. And then he called them, said, here you go. They opened the blanket, and that was the first time they saw me.
Wow.
Yeah. I do know that I am Mediterranean descent because I just had my eyes dilated for the first time, and the doctor said, oh, you're Mediterranean descent. And I said, I am? And he said, you are, and don't you know? And I said, no, I'm adopted. What are you telling me? And he said that people with Mediterranean descent have a 6-degree curvature of their eye, what is that called? The optic nerve. And only people who are Mediterranean, so Greece, Italy, Spain, I'm one of those, but I don't know what.
I can see that sort of in your coloring and facial makeup, that you might have some Mediterranean.
I was at the Greek festival, and the women there said I looked more Greek than they did. And they were positive I was Greek, but then I was in Puerto Rico just a few months ago, and everyone assumed, they started speaking Spanish to me, they assumed I was Puerto Rican, so I don't know. And I'll figure it out someday. Maybe I'll do one of those new DNA things where they'll tell you what your makeup is.
Sure.
So, we'll see.
In your time in Columbus, do you recall any things going on involving the gay community? Like, I'm talking like 60s, 70s, 80s, any protests or scandals or people being arrested or any activities?
Yeah, the only thing I can remember was, I remember when the guy who owned the Grapevine stole all the money and went out of town, because I had just been at the Short North business meeting. I was a realtor at the time, and I had just met him not very long before that. And someone had mentioned that he was gay. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know him. I remember that happening. I remember, like, we would go down dirty bookstores and people talking about glory holes and things. Honestly, I didn't know what they meant because I had never been in anything like that. And them talking about their feet sticking to the floor and how gross and disgusting it was. That's the only type of stories that I ever heard. Now then, when I was 25, I bought my first house, and you went to the Lion's Den. You took on Morris Road, you took a left on Westerville, and then my neighborhood was up there. So one night, there was 4 of us, 2 couples, my husband and myself and another couple, and we went in that Lion's Den. That was the first time I'd ever been there in my life. And of course, we parked our car behind the building because we didn't want anyone to see it, and went inside, and it was clean, and it wasn't anything that I expected. So, no, I think that I am pretty naive when it comes to that kind of stuff. I didn't hear about anything. I was pretty sheltered, I think, in a way.
This year was the 25th anniversary of the Pride of Stonewall, and the 24th anniversary of the Pride marches. The first march was in '82. Do you remember any coverage in the news or hearing about gay people marching in a parade or anything back in the 80s?
I do remember it because they would, of course, always show a horrid some horrid image, be it the bears in leather with chains, and making it look disgusting. They would try to, the news would always pick a slant, I felt, that was always very negative. Or showing the guys who just that day happened to dress up and act, like fairies or fruits or whatever word you want to call them. They're queer. They were acting queer, and they were just having a good time. Like if you're at Mardi Gras, do most of those people act like that? Of course not. But it's a party. So yeah, I always felt the news had a negative slant when it came to gay pride. And I do remember them covering it. Absolutely. My first gay pride was in 92. And then I've been at every one since then.
How did you first find out what Stonewall was, the organization?
Well, I happened to sell the executive director at that time when I first realized I was a lesbian. Her name was Phyllis Gorman, and she was the executive director, and I sold her a home. So that's how I heard about it.
Are there any other gay organizations or groups that you have had any contact with or been involved with over the years?
I am currently on the Legacy Fund board, which I'm absolutely thrilled with and proud of, and proud to be involved with the new, the inaugural board. So that's probably, Kaleidoscope is also something that I'm involved with. And how I get into these different organizations is through meeting a client, and then they tell me about the organization, and then I can become emotionally involved instead of, it's really funny. Until a couple of years ago, I always gave my money. I never gave my time. And I would say within the last 2 years is when I started to give my time and my parts of myself.
And what do you think motivated you to do that?
Number one, I knew that 2 years ago when we had to worry about DOMA and issue 1, that if I wasn't a part of the solution, be it not only with my money but my time, and it failed, I would never forgive myself. And so I guess fear, unfortunately, started something inside of me that I needed to be involved. Also, too, it was time to pull my weight, put up or shut up kind of thing. And, yeah, money's nice, but they also need bodies to do things. And also to be catalyst of exchanging and sharing information with, because I have a huge database, which I would never share with anyone, but I will, with my discretion, send what I think is pertinent information to my clients. So that it was time for me to do that.
After you realized that you were gay,
Mm-hmm.
what sorts of social activities did you participate in that were unique to the lesbian or the gay community?
I think lesbians are obviously very different than gay men. They do more home parties than I think gay men do. They don't do lots of clubs. Of course, there's always the First Friday at Wall Street, and that's really almost died out. There's so many different kinds of dykes. There's sporty dykes. You can go on Sunday to Berliner or whatever that softball place is called, and there's there's 20 different softball leagues, and there's the sporty dykes there. Or if you want the corporate dyke, there's places that you can find them, and then there's the golf dykes, who that within themselves are a group. There's the Michigan Love Fest dykes, I guess. So it's really cool how, even though we all share that we're dykes, that we're also different. And we all accept, I personally all accept all of us,
And what category would you put yourself in?
Oh, I'm totally the lipstick lesbian and corporate dyke. That would be me. I knew I never wanted children. I have 2 chihuahuas. That's enough for me. I knew I never wanted kids. That wasn't something I ever wanted. And I feel that there are so many people out there who do want children, that, God love them. I'm sure they have enough that I didn't need any, because I always knew that I was going to be in business. one way or the other. And it wouldn't be fair for me to have children and then for me to have somebody else raise them. That wasn't, if I was going to have kids, I would be involved, and I couldn't, not with my job choices. So it was I never had that maternal instinct, ever. And I was pregnant once and had a miscarriage. And so if I think about it, it kind of freaks me out that, oh my God, I could have had a kid that was 20-some years old now, you know? But everything, I really believe everything happens the way it's supposed to. We all make our choices. The life that we're living now is a manifestation of choices that we've made throughout, our life. And so I'm responsible for my life, and I'm really glad I did not have children, because, I have a great life, but doesn't involve children, except for grandchildren. I'm a great grandmother. I'm a great aunt. That kind of thing, but not something I'd want to do all the time.
Have you experienced any discrimination or harassment as a gay woman? I know you mentioned a couple of things, the young boys leaving the harassing messages. Right.
The only thing I ever had with an ex-partner one time, there were some boys in a neighborhood 3 houses ago who on Christmas Day threw some kind of I don't know if it was a paintball or an egg, something that was like a hot pink, and it hit our front door. And we knew who these boys were. They had been harassing us. They were probably, it was before they could drive, so 13, 14, 15. And I just went outside and I washed it, and, and that was it. I didn't make a big deal about it. Have I ever had to call the police on someone, or, no, I've never had. Luckily, again, I've never had an experience like that. Now, I think, too, I am really good at, when I feel threatened, I can come out like a pit bull. And I've had to do that a couple of times with, usually men who I was not dressed provocatively, but, I have large boobs. So guys would make some kind of a comment or something, and they'd see then that I was with my girlfriend, who was obviously a dyke, and make some comment. And, I just get in their face and yell right back, and they just kind of can't believe that would come out of a woman's mouth. And leave me alone. So no, I haven't. And I don't think about, nowadays you have to be careful. People have guns, people, that road rage stuff, people can just go crazy. But I'm really lucky. I've never had any kind of, and I've never lived in a neighborhood where I was scared either. I've always lived in the burbs. So I don't know that I put myself in a position where I'm ever too worried about that. The only type of thing that I've ever had is had to have conversations with people who didn't agree about it. And that was more interesting, because I'd like to hear their point of view and why they feel the way they do, and want to, if I can, break whatever it is that makes them feel the way they do. Like to show them that, hey, look, I'm normal. I don't have 2 heads, and I don't eat children at midnight and drink their blood, So.
What are what's the thing or the things that you're most proud of so far in your life?
I am proud of what a good daughter I was to my mother. I am proud that I am known in my business as having a very good reputation. As Lynn Greer would say, a stellar reputation. I can remember those words came out of her mouth, and it almost made me cry. I was so thrilled, because I think she's a stellar human being. When I get to see, I am most proud of the people that I have helped buy a home who didn't think that they could. And I have a book with all their letters saying thank you over and over again. And so I'm very, very proud of that. I'm proud of being a good human being and being a good citizen and being a good neighbor, and just trying to, I don't know if this is a 40s thing, my being in my 40s, but I have really cared the last 5 years or so more about other people than I ever did my entire life. And I don't know if that's an age thing or if it's just a me thing. And really trying to understand. I think it seems like our society, and I don't know if you got to hear Rhonda Rivera talk about this at the Legacy Fund, people are in fear. People are so angry. And I've seen this in my business. I've seen how my business has changed in the last 5 to 10 years, where people are so angry, they are so hurt, they are so hopeless. I've never known so many people out of work in my entire life. And so when I find someone who's in that situation, and to be able to help them just a little bit, be it with their personal life, having a conversation with them, or taking their resume and forwarding it onto my database, saying, hey guys, if you know of anybody, any of those little kindnesses that I would want someone to do for me, or if they're in a bad financial situation, or in a divorce situation, or something like that, where they have to sell their home, and I'm the 3rd realtor, and nobody else could do it, and I get to come in and be the hero. I love that. It's like being Superwoman. It's like, da-da-da, Darla's here. And I love that I can do that. And so I feel very fortunate. And I know these gifts were given to me by God, and I just hope to use them so that I can be proud of the kind of person I am. Because I really wasn't. When I grew up in an alcoholic family, I'm an incest survivor, and when I first was in my 20s, I was not someone I was proud to be. I was a liar, automatic liar. I would take advantage of anyone that I possibly could, and somewhere in my late 20s, I decided I didn't want to be a person like that. So with a lot of therapy and a lot of hard work, I had to teach myself not to lie by wearing a rubber band around my wrist. Whenever I lied, which was so automatic at first, because what I would hear is, we can't come tonight to the party because Ralph's working late. Ralph was my father. Ralph was really on the floor, passed out drunk. So I was taught to lie. It's not that my mother meant to, but it's all she did the best she could. So I would take this rubber band and teach myself, every time I lie, I'd pull this rubber band and have to teach myself how not to be a liar, because I didn't learn those basic things at home. I'm not saying I want sympathy or anything like that, but it wasn't something that I learned. I had to teach myself. So I'm really proud of the person that I have become at 46 years old. And I'm looking forward to seeing what I'm like in my 50s, because I know I'll just get better and better in terms of becoming a good, what I would say, a good human being. I don't know if you ever watched the Screen Actors, and one of the questions he says, what is, God say when you come to the pearly gates? And I want God to say that he's proud of me and that I worked really hard.
You mentioned a moment ago Issue 1 and DOMA as being motivating forces for you to get involved. Well, how do you see the political environment in Ohio in the future for gay people?
Oh my gosh, it depends on this election, unfortunately. I think a lot of it depends on Blackwell. I didn't realize I could still be afraid of someone, and he scares me very much. The right wing, the political, the religious right wing group of folks who really have a target at gay and lesbians, they worry me. So I think the election is going to be a deciding factor of what way our state is, how my life is going to be, and how easy it is to have my life in Columbus, Ohio. I feel, I walk with my girlfriend and hold hands whenever I want. I kiss her whenever I want. I feel very comfortable doing that anywhere, anytime, any place. Being appropriate, of course, as I would be with a man. For whatever reason, I have a fear that that would change if Blackwell is going to be our next elected official. That worries me. So that's important to me, that he does not get elected. I would hope that it can go two ways, and I think it's really important that he does not get elected. And so everyone that I know, I have put out and said, look, we need your money, we need your time, we need you to, do you vote? Are you a registered voter? Please, you need to vote. So I've never been as emotionally involved since issue 1, endowment, all of those things. That's when it started. That was the first time I became emotionally involved in politics. Before I was like, eh. Now I voted every year. I did my duty as a citizen. I got my little League of Women Voters, and I read, what I thought, all their responses, and I circled the person that sounded good to me. And that is one of the other things that I am getting more and more involved in, not only philanthropics, but now also the political arena of I want to be proud of the people we elect. And I don't want to pick them just because they are accepting of gay and lesbians. You know what? I want them, I don't not only want them to accept me, I want them to encourage us. I want them to be passionate that we are citizens just like anybody else. So that's the person I'm looking to. And I don't know if that person's raised their head yet or not, because I don't know that I've seen that.
You've mentioned your wife a couple of times. Tell me a little bit about that relationship.
My wife, her name is Elaine Stewart. She's the absolutely most wonderful person walking on this earth. I sold her a home 12 years ago. That's originally how I met her. Of course, she was with someone and I was with someone, and I'm very monogamous. That's another difference between lesbians and gay men. Ha ha to all my gay men friends. It just so happened that she had been single for 3 years, and I was single, and I gave myself a pact in the summer of 2004. I was not going to date until January 1st because I needed to be by myself for at least 8 months and to figure out what I wanted in my next partner, what was important to me. And I know myself, I can be impulsive, and I didn't want to be impulsive. So if I had a date, then that would stop me from doing anything silly. So we started having group dates. And because, again, I sold this group of gals and then get referred to another group of gals, so all these people all come together. And they were having parties, and so Elaine and I kept seeing each other at these parties. And of course, the first party, she said she was going to kick my ass, and we were playing croquet. And so in high heels, I beat her playing croquet, which she never lived down. And I always thought she was a really smart woman. I always thought that she was funny. And she always referred the most business to me. So every year, the top 10 people who refer business to me, I take them out to dinner and a show. Well, she was always there. And I just always thought she was hilarious and just a very high-quality person. I admired her very much as a person. And so then it was this time when we're playing croquet, and I look at her, and it's like in my head, it was like this light bulb came on. And I thought, that she could be a potential dating person. And so then I thought, but not till January 1st. So I tucked it in the back of my mind. And then we kept, doing things together and as a group. And then finally, on December 22nd, we had our first single date. And, that knowing thing I was telling you about, I had a party on New Year's Eve because I wanted to make sure I knew where she was. And she came to my party I had about 50 people there. And I gave her a card that said, don't open until midnight. So at midnight, she opened the card, and it said, have a fabulous new year. And on the inside, I wrote, I like you so much. I hope you like me. It sounds like 6th grade. Would you like to go out on a date? It's officially now January 1st. I could ask. So she comes out, and she says, well, I got your card. Are you sure you want to do this? Because I know you had a bad experience. And, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, you've got that house full of people back there. Maybe you just want a buddy. And I said, you see that house full of people? I got lots of buddies. I want a date. So she said yes, and then we went on a date the very next day, and I have been with her every day since.
Wow.
And that was January 1st of 2005. And then in May 11th of this year, 2006, we went to New York, and we got married on top of the Empire State Building after having a fabulous dinner at oh my gosh, what's the name of it? The Rainbow Room. And then we got on our honeymoon cruise that was 8 days to the Virgin Islands. So,
congratulations.
Thank
that
you.
Sounds very nice.
And our rings. See my beautiful ring?
Very nice.
So, we did the whole thing up. So she's a wonderful person. I'm very proud to say that she's my wife.
Well, I think I've worked through the questions that I had prepared to ask. I don't know if there's anything additional that you wanted to talk about that we haven't hit upon yet.
The only thing I would mention is I did not, and this is something for me personally, I did not know that other women hit other women. There was lesbian domestic violence. I did not know that. I always thought men hit women. That's what I saw, so that's what I knew. There's also lesbian domestic violence where other lesbians hit other lesbians. I'm sure in the gay community I've heard that men hit men. I just want to make sure that people know that they know they don't deserve, no matter what they do, who they are, or what they say, they do not deserve to ever be threatened emotionally or physically, and that even, it doesn't mean you're stupid, because I'm very smart, and I was in a situation for 12 years where I was emotionally and physically bruised and beaten and battered and had to have someone arrested to get out of a very horrible, horrible situation. And so I would just want to tell anyone that they don't deserve to be treated like that. And even if it means losing any monetary thing that you have, or a pet, or a family. I lost a family. I had 2 sister-in-laws and 2 brother-in-laws and 6 nieces and nephews and a mother-in-law. I lost a family because, of course, they would side with their blood relative, and I understand that. And that's what held me on for so long. But it's not worth your dignity. It's not worth your mental and physical love of self.